Chapter 12. Ouch, oh, ouch, ow, ow. Konrad hit pine tree branches, taking the impact to his face and body as he tried to protect the poor guy strapped to his back. He was fairly sure he could survive a hard fall. He didn't know if his instructor could. At last they stopped falling and bounced, suspended above the ground. As soon as Konrad caught his breath, he called out, "Hey, are you all right back there?" An eerie silence answered him. "Shit." He squirmed despite his pain, trying to pull himself loose from the harness so he could turn around and examine his instructor. "Damn trees," he muttered. Konrad knew their descent wasn't normal. He just didn't know what to do about. His instructor yelled something like, "Don't," as Konrad dragged him out the door. He hadn't heard him speak since, but Roz had screamed in fear. He had to be sure she was all right and reassure her and himself. People ran toward them shouting. He groaned and didn't know if he should call out that they were okay or not. He was cut and bruised but breathing. He couldn't speak for the man strapped to his back. When the first two guys got to them, they called out, "Are you all right?" Konrad answered, "Yes, I think so," and waited an anxious moment. At last a shaky voice behind him said, "Fuck, what the hell?" "Curtis," yelled a guy from the ground. "Are you okay? What happened?" The guy behind him spoke in exhaled breaths. "Student panic, bailed too. Soon hit my head, managed to pull the drogue before I passed out. Came to just now." Roz and her instructor were among the last to arrive. She looked up at them with wild eyes. "Help them," she cried. One of the onlookers said, "They've got to be 50 feet up. It would take anyone a while to climb, even a professional tree climber. Hey guys, if I throw you a knife, can you cut your way out?" "I'll give it a shot," Konrad called down to them. He felt blood trickle down his face. "They might fall." Roz cried, "Wait, they're not far in. Maybe the fire department can reach them." Konrad's hearing was so acute, he could understand what people were saying on the ground, even when they were whispering among themselves. Roz's instructor nodded. "Good idea. Besides, it's against protocol to climb down from a tree landing." Roz looked around at the small crowd that had gathered and asked, "Can someone call 911 and ask them to bring a ladder truck?" "I will," one of the female employees said. She pulled a cell phone from her vest pocket. Roz turned to the woman and said, "Have them bring a couple of ambulances too. They could have internal injuries." "No ambulance for me," Konrad yelled. "I'm fine." The moon was almost full again and he'd heal fast. Besides, he couldn't afford an ambulance ride and hospital bill. He swiveled his head. "You okay, buddy?" "My head hurts and feels like it's about the size of Mount Rushmore." "There are 4 heads on Mount Rushmore." "Exactly." He groaned. Roz turned to the woman with the cell phone and whispered, "Don't listen to my boyfriend. He's in shock." She just nodded and walked a few steps away while she spoke to the dispatcher. "I'm not in shock, Roz. I'm fine, really. 1 ambulance will do it." She looked startled. Oh yeah, he wasn't supposed to be able to hear her whisper from so far away. He'd have a hard time explaining that unless he sent a message to her telepathically. "You're upset, darling. I know that. I can hear it and sense. Please don't worry. I'm all right. Really. The tree broke my fall. And you broke your instructor's fall, but he sounds like he's badly hurt. You might not feel it right now because of the adrenaline, but you have to get checked out." She crossed her arms and tried to look tough. "I mean it." Unfortunately, she only looked more adorable, and he couldn't say no. He sighed deeply. "Okay, you win." A hint of a smile curved her lips. "I guess skydiving's off the list." "You are so right." His instructor was being kept overnight for observation, yet Konrad had broken his fall. The hospital reluctantly discharged her stubborn boyfriend, even after he had refused an MRI to check for internal bleeding. Roz had tried everything she could think of to reason with him and make him stay, but he just kept saying he was fine. He sure as hell didn't look fine. His denim jacket sleeves had been shredded. He was cut and bruised all over his face, and yet he wouldn't let anyone lay a hand on him. He wouldn't even let the doctor stitch the gash on the side of his temple. Once it stopped bleeding, and it seemed to stop quickly. A few butterfly bandages kept it from starting again. Roz hoped that was a good sign. By the time they had been seen, processed, and spit out, it was evening. Konrad promised to go straight to bed. She knew it was late, but to leave Konrad alone in his apartment was wrong. He was proud and stubborn, but she shouldn't have left even when he insisted. What if he was unaware of some kind of internal injury and died in his sleep? She'd never forgive herself. She made a big pot of chicken soup and carried it carefully up the stairs. When she reached the landing, his door opened and he stepped out of his apartment naked. What the? There wasn't a scratch on him. No blood, no bruises, no band-aids. He was as naked and perfect as the day he was born. His gaze snapped in her direction. Roz. Konrad, why are you? How did you? As she stammered, he stared at her as if she were the one standing there naked. I can explain, he said. She waited, but no explanation followed. What the hell could he tell her? He was a fast-healing nudist? He wore a bruise suit earlier, but he took it off in favor of his birthday suit? The full moon was approaching, and he could feel the urge to change. This fiasco couldn't have happened at a worse time. Roz, can the explanation possibly wait until tomorrow? Her jaw dropped. You've got to be out of your ever-loving mind. No, it can't. Wait. Down below, Nathan exited his apartment with his bicycle. He froze when he saw Roz on the landing above. Oh. He looked quite surprised to see her, and then he spotted Konrad. Shit. Now what? Nathan was the one who let Konrad out on his way to work in the evening, and Sly let him in just before dawn. Konrad had tried stashing his clothes in the alley behind the dumpsters, but a couple of times they were gone in the morning. Although rare, some thorough city worker probably made sure everything hit the dumpster. In that case, he had to wait until he could shift back, knock on Sly's window because his keys had gone missing with his clothes, and traipse naked through the hallway and up the stairs. Crap. Quickly assessing his options, he realized there were only two things he could do. Get back into his apartment fast or change right in front of her. Not shifting into his wolf form during the full moon wasn't an option. That decision had been made for him when he was bitten long ago. He could feel his body vibrate, the first sign of an impending change. He fled into the relative safety of his apartment and hoped Roz wouldn't follow and catch him in mid-shift. She'd be horrified. He had to leave the door unlocked and open a crack to get back out. Could he manipulate the doorknob with his paws? Perhaps. But if he couldn't, the wolf in him would likely panic and try to claw his way out. A wolf had to run. Not this time. If she saw him change, it would be more traumatizing than to think he had a pet wolf scratching and howling at the door, so he retreated and slammed the door. Nathan, still gazing at the top of the stairs, said, "Oh." Roz snapped her attention to him. "What the hell is going on?" He shook his head and said, "Oh boy." Roz set the pot of soup beside Konrad's door and scurried back down the stairs for an in-your-face interrogation, which she'd occasionally done with the most tight-lipped criminals. "Nathan, you know something about this, don't you?" Nathan didn't lose his cool. He cocked his head and answered, "I'm not known for my discretion, but in this case I'm going to forget what I saw, and I suggest you do the same." "Forget what I saw?" Her voice rose. "Forget? How can I? I'm not just concerned about his coming out of his apartment stark naked. A few hours ago, he was badly bruised, cut, and bleeding. Now there's not a mark on him. What the hell is that about?" He shrugged. "What can I say? Some of us are fast healers." He started to wheel his bicycle past her, but she grabbed his collar. "Oh no, you don't." He pried her fingers off and calmly said, "I'm afraid I can't stay and chat. I'll be late for work." A tiny bit of sanity returned. She couldn't keep him there against his will. With a deep sigh, she stepped back and let him go. He opened the door but stopped to fiddle with something on his bike. Now about Konrad. She heard some type of faint grinding noise coming from upstairs and then a whimper. She dashed back up the steps and tried his door. To her surprise, it opened. Sitting in front of her was a big dog. It looked like some kind of scruffy German shepherd, but the biggest one she'd ever seen. She'd have been afraid. Except that with his tongue hanging out, he looked like he had a big goofy grin on his face. "Huh, who are you, boy?" Should she pat this strange dog or not? His eyes looked friendly, but his jaw appeared powerful enough to snap her arm like a twig. The door across the hall opened, and Dottie came into view. "What's all the racket out here?" she demanded. Roz turned toward her and stammered, "Oh, She was trying to think of what to say when the big dog ran around her legs and bounded down the stairs. Dottie threw her hands in the air. Darn it. I told Konrad to get rid of that wolf months ago. What the heck is it doing back here? Nathan called up the stairs. I'll get rid of him, Mrs. F. He opened the door and the dog or wolf or whatever ran off. Nathan followed him out and let the door slam. Puzzled, Roz turned back to Dottie. Wolf? That was a wolf. Dottie didn't answer. She marched across the hall and banged on the door jamb, because the door was already open. Konrad, come out here. They waited. No answer. Roz said, should I go in? Dottie raised her eyebrows, smiled, and said in a syrupy way, I suppose you'd be welcome any time since he's your boyfriend. Go ahead. I'll wait right here. Roz remembered that he was naked and said, no need to wait. I'll talk to him about his pet. He'll probably want to know it ran away. Thank God, Dottie mumbled. To Roz's relief, Dottie returned to her apartment and shut the door. She crept in and called out, Konrad. Still no answer. What could he be doing? Was he hiding from her? The more she thought about his mysteriousness, the angrier she got. Where the hell are you? She took a deep breath and marched to his bedroom. She threw open the door, half expecting to find him hiding under the covers. He wasn't there and his bed was made. Okay, he must be in the bathroom. The door was open, so she poked her head in. It was empty. Where could he have gone? He must be hiding in a closet. Now she was pissed. She opened each closet and pantry door and found no one. What the fuck? It was as if he'd disappeared into thin air. She jammed her hands on her hips. Well, that does it. She found a sticky notepad and a pen and scribbled, your disappearing act and deceit have me at a loss. There's more you're not telling me, and I won't stand for lies. I'm afraid we're through. As she reread it, tears formed in her eyes. Was she being rash? The more she thought about it, the more she realized the words were right. She'd been patient, more than patient, yet her belief in him had only led to more lies and disappointment. She slammed the door on her way out and returned to her apartment for a good cry. Roz opened the door. Konrad pounded so hard he was afraid he'd splinter the solid oak if he didn't calm down. He took a couple of steps back and raked his fingers through his hair. Dottie would be down in seconds if he kept that up. Tough. Nothing can drag me away. Certainly not some 98-pound busybody. He could hear someone inside Roz's apartment, and he would not leave until she opened the door. Wait a minute, he didn't have to wait for her to open the door. All he had to do was open his mind to her. Roz, please give me a chance. I'll tell you everything. You'll tell me more lies. Go away. I won't. I swear. I'll tell you the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. God is probably the only one who can help you, because if you lie to me again, you're beyond redemption. I'm not evil, Roz. Says you. Open the door. Please, please, please open the door. She didn't answer him and the door didn't open. His nerves were getting the best of him, and he tried pacing off the pent-up energy. Okay, I'm going to have to tell you everything like this. I had hoped to be with you to reassure you, hold you, and show you how gentle I can be. But if this is how you want it, so be it. I'm not going to lie to you anymore. He heard a long, resigned sigh on the other side. This is going to sound preposterous, but I swear it's true, and I can prove. My brother and I were about 10 when we decided to run away from home. We were making our way through the woods by the light of the full moon when we came upon a sight so bizarre we couldn't believe our eyes. A group of human beings changed into a pack of wolves. He waited for some reaction. There was a barely audible thump, as if she'd plopped into a chair or dropped something on the floor. Are you all right? That's a trick question, right? Continue. At least she hadn't fainted. Okay. We tried to run but were overtaken by the wolves and pinned down. Thought we were done for. Apparently they were waiting for their leader, the alpha wolf, to decide our fate. For some reason I couldn't scream or cry. I simply waited for the inevitable. Nicholas whimpered, and it spurred me into action. It was bad enough that I was about to be eaten. If I could spare my brother, well, I punched and kicked and fought as hard as I could to get to him. Yes, I was bitten, but I didn't know at the time that Nick would take his cue from me and try to fight too. We were both bitten and clawed and thus infected with the same lupin toxin that had infected the rest of the pack. He paused, half expecting her to laugh. When all he heard was her rapid breathing, he continued. We were bitten by werewolves. Before you dismiss this as insane, think about Some of the things you've seen with your own eyes. I healed in hours from a fall that might have killed anyone else. I have superhuman strength. Last night you saw my wolf form moments after you saw me disappear into my apartment naked. He heard something and waited. He hoped she was getting up to open the door. He heard her footsteps, but instead of coming closer, they sounded like they were going farther away and picking up speed. At last he heard a thud and creak, as if she'd thrown herself on her bed, followed by the unmistakable sound of weeping. Mary. Roz knew her voice was shaking and hoped she didn't sound like a scared little girl despite feeling like one. At least over the telephone, her best friend couldn't see her face, red and blotchy from crying. Roz, I'm so excited to hear from you. How's everything going? Roz sat on her bed and examined her Egyptian cotton sheets, mascara stained. Her pillowcase. Not good. Oh my God. What happened? I'm sorry. Before we get into my troubles, how's married life? Mary chuckled. It's awesome. Really great. But it sounds like you need to talk more than I do. Yeah, big time. Roz sighed. Are you busy right now? Nope. I was about to make dinner, but I can ask Jason to go grab takeout. Then we'll have complete privacy. You don't have to do that. In fact, you might like to have Jason nearby when I tell you this. Oh no. What happened? It sounds horrible. No, Roz shook her head. I didn't mean to alarm you. It's not a disaster. At least not to anyone but me. And maybe Konrad. Konrad? The Konrad who lives in my building. Our building. I moved into your old apartment. She heard Mary gasp, then squeal. That's fantastic. I can't wait to get home and welcome you with a big hug. Yeah, I was going to save it for a surprise, but now her voice broke and she couldn't continue. Sobs rose to the back of her throat and threatened to burst out. Roz, what is it? She coughed. We fell in love. I was so happy. Then, her throat clogged. Again. How the hell do I tell her the love of my life is a werewolf? Mary made a soft, sympathetic sound. Oh honey, whatever happened, I'm on your side. You know that, right? There are no sides. It's not like that. She sniffed. Somehow she had to find the courage to tell her. The only person who might understand this was Mary. Do you remember when you told me about Jason's secret? God, yes. I'll never forget it. You were so brave and understanding. Thought you'd call the men in white coats on me, but instead you just listen. I can't tell you how much that meant. Well, maybe now you can return the favor. Konrad was holding something back. And I knew it. I didn't want to push him because she was going to say, the best thing that's ever happened to me, but knew she'd choke up if she said the words. I'm sorry. This is hard. I know, Mary said softly. A quiet moment of understanding passed between them, and Roz steeled herself, calling on courage she didn't feel at the moment. Mary, apparently Jason isn't the only shapeshifter in the building. I know. There's his uncle Ralph and Nathan too. Roz sat up straight. Nathan? Yeah, he's able to shift into a raven. He even battled off Morgane's pet owl that Jason was up against in falcon form. He would have been toast if Nathan hadn't intervened. I didn't tell you about them because I didn't think it mattered. It was enough to accept that my husband was a shapeshifter, and I didn't know you were going to move into the building. I'm not sure I'd have let you if I'd known. Roz chuckled. That's why I didn't tell you. Mary joined in the brief moment of humor and said, what does Konrad have to do with this? Konrad's a shifter too. Really? Mary sounded not only surprised but pleased. Yeah, don't get excited though. He's not a pretty bird like your husband or Nathan. He's a werewolf. A what? You heard me right. A werewolf. A big furry doggy with huge teeth and supernatural strength. Not the kind you'd want to sit on your lap. Mary's side of the line went eerily quiet. At last she said, that explains how he and Sly managed to save my life the night I was attacked. He what? Saved your life? What attack? I didn't tell you because I didn't want it getting back to my father, and the fewer people who knew the better. It happened the day after I moved in. I had just returned home from work, exhausted, and wasn't paying much attention when I walked from my car to the back door of the building. Somebody jumped me and Konrad and Sly rescued me from a would-be rapist. He had a knife to my throat. They tossed him off me like he was a sock puppet. Dear God, why didn't you tell me? As I said, I couldn't risk my father finding out about it. He'd have dragged my ass back to Rhode Island faster than Jason can throw a baseball. How did they save you? I thought it was Sly who did it, but now that I know about Konrad, well, it could have been either of them. One of them picked up the guy by the belt and flung him several feet away like he was a big blow-up doll. Well, maybe. That's not the best description, but you get what I mean, right? Yeah, I do. Konrad's lifted and carried me like I was a blow-up doll. And, come to think of it, that's a very apt description. At last she was able to chuckle, remembering how his strong arms cradled her or tossed her over his shoulder, and the phenomenal sex they'd had. The sadness descended again. I don't know how I'll ever replace him, Mary. He was so kind and gentle. And he made me feel almost petite. It's the first time a guy has ever made me feel so feminine. Oh damn. The tears broke through and she let them flow. Eventually she sobbed from deep in her gut. Roz, it's okay. Let it out. I'm here. Mary's quiet voice crooned words that were meant to be accepting and comforting through the sobs, but Roz felt no better. She wanted nothing more than to run up the stairs and throw herself into her lover's arms, wolf or no wolf, yet the rational part of her wouldn't allow it. She knew nothing about what he was. And if everything he said was true, what about that? What had he called it? Toxin? Had he exposed her to something? Was it sexually transmitted? I have so many questions, Mary, but I don't dare ask him about any of it. Don't know if I'm safe with him. I've always felt safe with him. Has he done anything to make you feel unsafe? No. In fact, he made me feel very safe. Completely protected, loved, even treasured. Well, there you go. You probably are all those things. How would you feel about leaving a child in his care? Before I knew, I'd absolutely totally trust him with a child. I even saw him run into traffic, risking his own life to save a toddler. That's the Konrad I knew. What's changed? Other than your knowing his secret? Anything. I know he lied to me. I don't know if I can believe anything he tells me. Now, how did he lie? The first time he was arrested for attempted theft, I represented him. He allegedly lifted a 1-ton freezer full of frozen meat, carried it out of a restaurant and dropped it onto the sidewalk. We got the case dismissed by saying it wasn't humanly possible to do what he was accused of doing. That's probably true, Roz. But if he's a werewolf, then either he lied or he's not human. I don't like either of those explanations. Mary took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Roz, there are all kinds of things in this world I never knew existed until I moved to Boston. Specifically to our building. Welcome to Wacko Central. Now that you live there too, you should probably know all of it. Roz gulped. There's more. I'm afraid so. You're sitting down, I hope. Yes. Where are you exactly? In my bedroom on my bed. Good. You might want to lie down in case you faint. Mary, what the hell? Mary chuckled, but it sounded like a nervous laugh. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make it worse than it is. Just take a few deep breaths and try to relax. Roz did, and it helped. Okay, I'm ready. Lay it on me. Okay, here's the thing. Even though we live in a building full of paranormals, I feel safe, maybe even safer than I would in a building full of human strangers. How well does anyone know their neighbors anyway? Apparently not that well. Right. But I've gotten to know everyone in our building very well. You, Dottie, Joe Murphy, and I are the only so-called normal people there. Roz took in the information and ticked off the names of the other residents out loud. Okay, I know about Jason, Nathan, and Konrad, so Ralph. Another Falcon. Gwyneth and Morgane? Witches. What do you mean? They're not supernatural, just regular women who practice Wicca, right? I guess so, although I'm not totally sure. Sly asked Morgane to put a spell on the newspaper ad I answered, advertising the apartment. He said the spell made the ad visible to me and my family, but no one else could see it. That ensured I'd be the only one to answer the ad. By Sly you mean the guy who turned out to be your biological father, right? Right. Silvestro Flores is his real name, but he likes to be called Sly. He's in the building too. He lives here? I didn't know that. Which apartment? None. He's in the basement. The basement? There's no apartment in the basement, just a laundry room and a dark, dirty storage area and utility room. Yeah. Sly doesn't have a lot of stuff and he doesn't need fancy digs. Although I'd love to see some kind of fixed up space for him. He's my father. After all. Of course. Let me get this right. If you Dottie Joe and I are the only guaranteed humans. Mary interrupted. No guarantees. Roz groaned, but continued her inventory. And Gwyneth and Morgane are witches, and Jason and Ralph are shapeshifting falcons, and Nathan's a shapeshifting raven, and Konrad's a werewolf. That would mean Sly is a vampire. Roz froze in shock. Her throat constricted, or she would have yelled. What? Mary must have interpreted her silence, though. He's a vampire. Don't worry. He doesn't feed on the neighbors. Roz's head spun. Finally, she understood why Mary wanted her to lie down. Chapter 14. Roz walked through the purple door of the beauty school and salon where she and Morgane had gone before. Beverly, the head instructor, stood next to a student working on a haircut and glanced over her shoulder. Back again so soon? Is there a problem with your color? Roz said. Not the color. Look. She turned around to show off her singed ends. The woman in the student's chair gasped. Oh no. That damage isn't from the student, Beverly was quick to point out. She rushed over. What happened? It was a cooking accident. Holy smokes. Roz chuckled. You can say that again. Is there any way it can be fixed? We'll have to try. My best student is just finishing up. Caroline, are you happy with your hair? Very, considering I didn't come out looking like that. She pointed to Roz. I don't want to bump any of your scheduled clients. I just wanted to show it to you, first to see if you can fix it, and second so you could figure out how much time you'll need. I can't let you walk out of here looking like that. I trust the girls to finish what they're doing without my hovering over them. I'll take care of you myself. She spoke to the student. Anna, take your client to the front desk. Please. Okay, but as soon as I do that, can I watch what you're doing? Sure, fixing things like this would be good for you to see. In fact, all my students should see it. Do you mind, Roz? I guess not. I'm a guinea pig after all. The client got out of the chair and gestured to it. Here. You need this more than I do. Roz thanked the tactless woman and got comfortable in the black leather chair. Beverly walked around the salon and gathered students who weren't in the middle of anything time-sensitive. Anna walked her client to the front desk and returned. That's a shame. You're lucky it was in the back, though. You could have singed off your eyebrows. Yeah, and have to draw them on again every morning. At least I still look all right lying on my back. I'm glad Konrad can wait for doggy style a little longer. You're right. It could be worse. You know, you could always go for the Victoria Beckham look. It's very chic. That would be great if my hair will cooperate. Beverly chimed in as she made her way back with 3 more students. I was just thinking of doing that. A wedge in the back and longer in front. Anything shorter and you'd look like a boy. Roz sat up straight and raised her eyebrows. Oh no. I didn't mean that. You're not feminine. You're beautiful. Really? 'Kay, she still earns a tip. So what happened? Anna asked. Roz smiled despite herself. I was taking a cooking class with my boyfriend. If we'd been paying nearly as much attention to the stove as we were to each other, this wouldn't have happened. The girls laughed. Love, said Beverly. It can be hazardous to your health. Despite her embarrassment, Roz liked the idea of helping students learn, which is why she'd come to the school instead of an upscale Newberry Street salon in the first place. Well, that and the $300 difference. Okay, girls. For singed hair like this, what do you think you should do? Dry, cut it, or wash and cut? The students sounded as if they were split about evenly on the answer. Well, I'd cut it dry first just to get the hair all of the same integrity. Then wash it and cut it again. I'm bound to be here all day. The girls look so interested though. Roz decided, what the heck? Go for it. Beverly looked excited too. She probably hadn't had the chance to show off her skills for a while. She combed out the parts that weren't burned first, blunt, cut the extra length off, and then pulled the back of the hair out straight. Ugh, what a mess, one of the students said. Roz saw Beverly squint at her in the mirror. Is that the way to talk to clients? No, ma'am. She's right. My hair is ugly. Beverly continued teaching. If you were going to do a layered look, you'd start from here and work toward here, but in this case, Roz tuned her out for a while. All she knew was she wanted to come out looking good. Good for Konrad? Good for court? She was happy when she realized she just wanted to look good for herself. She was ready for a change. It must be fulfilling to take someone from icky to beautiful. Oh, it is, Beverly said. When you know someone leaves your chair 10 times happier than they came in, it's the best feeling in the world, isn't it? Girls. They all nodded and murmured agreement. Roz had an epiphany. How long does it take to complete a hairdressing course? It depends. Most programs are under a year, and then you have to pass an exam to get your license. For young beginners, I recommend a vocational school or junior college for formal training. Some with experience can go to an advanced program and learn salon ownership and management. This is a good time to get into hairdressing, especially in the city. Predictions are for steady employment growth, especially in upscale urban salons. Seriously? So what if I wanted to wind up in one of those really high-end salons on Newberry Street? What training would you suggest for someone like me? How cool would that be? Konrad and I could own a trendy salon, and I wouldn't have to worry about women hitting on him because they'd all assume he was gay. Wait a minute, I don't have to worry about that anyway because he's monogamous. You? I thought you were a lawyer. Yeah, but I'm tired of cutting people off at the knees. Think I might like cutting their hair and making them feel better instead of worse. Beverly grinned. I'd like to recommend this school, but if you can afford it, there are a couple of places with names you'd recognize. Like. Beverly glanced at her students. I'll write down the information for you later. Morgane explained to Roz that she couldn't just drive Chad to the museum. Spirit energy wasn't like occupying a corporeal body. If he sat in the back seat, as soon as Roz rolled out of the alley and onto the street, the car would take off and Chad wouldn't. Apparently it made Roz picture an episode of Casper the Friendly Ghost in her brain, and she laughed. Chad wasn't amused. The trio strolled up Brookline Avenue with the intention of walking Chad to the Gardner Museum. It was only a couple of miles, but for Morgane it was a big deal. Agoraphobia meant fear of open spaces. Riding in a car could still be problematic, but walking outside in public made her chest tighten and her pulse race. Remember, she told herself millions of dollars in reward money. After that, their plans were fuzzy. Morgane would try to summon Reginald and let the two spirits communicate while she listened in. Morgane, thanks for speaking to Chad. Is he still with us? Chad. I'm here. He communicated half-heartedly. Don't sulk. You agreed to help Konrad, remember? I'm not sulking. I'm looking at that big-ass bridge over the highway. Morgane came to a halt. Bridge. Roz's hand covered her mouth. Oh no. I read about agoraphobia. Fear of bridges was mentioned specifically. Yeah, I feel pretty exposed on bridges. But I think Chad sounded nervous about it too. She took a deep breath and grounded herself. Are you saying you might have trouble crossing the bridge, Chad? It's the wind. What wind? From the traffic below. If it kicks up at the wrong moment, I'll be blown halfway to Brighton. If memory serves, the turnpike is always busy, so this bridge is almost always windy. It's been nice knowing ya. Her jaw dropped. Why didn't you tell me this before? Roz cocked her head. What's wrong? A young woman wearing jeans and a sweater approached from the other side of the bridge. Her long sandy hair suddenly lifted in the wind and wrapped around her face. She grasped it, twirled it into a ponytail and knotted it behind her head. Morgane whispered furiously behind her hand to Roz. Even if I managed to cross this thing, Chad says he could be blown off course by the wind from the highway below. Morgane and Roz turned to each other and at the same time uttered a worried, oh no. Roz looked crestfallen. How are we going to manage this? Morgane wrung her hands. I guess it wasn't such a good idea. Hey kids, don't give up so easily. I can try to use the two of you as a shield. If that doesn't work, I'll simply make my way back as soon as I can. Morgane waited for the woman to pass them before she answered. The woman hung her head and didn't make eye contact, so there was no need to say hello. When it was just the two or three of them again, Morgane said, Chad, that's really decent of you. I didn't realize you cared about Konrad so much. I don't, but you said something that made me think. Really? What was that? You said he'd do the same for me. And you were right. In fact, recently Joe and Gwyneth were making whoopee over his head, and something made him think. The noise was me trying to get someone's attention. He actually got off his butt and came upstairs to see if there was anything he could do. Even though he can't communicate with you? What's he saying? Roz asked. He said he realized Konrad would do the same for him. Come to think of it, Konrad's the one guy in the building everyone counts on for help if they need it. Roz smiled. That's my guy. Or werewolf or whatever. Her expression turned serious again. Are you sure I'm not going to be in danger if he shifts when he's with me? What did he tell you? He said he'd never attack me, that a werewolf will protect the pack, especially his mate and pups, over all others. She shook her head. I still can't get used to the idea of calling children pups. Morgane raised her eyebrows. Are you saying you might give birth to a litter of wolves? Roz let out a howl of laughter. No. He was human until about age 10 when he was bitten, and unless the children are turned, they'll stay human. Phew. That must be a relief. Yeah, somehow we'll make this work. If I can keep him out of jail. Then we need to talk to Reginald and get him to admit to planting false evidence. I'm still not sure how we're going to get Chad to the museum. Okay, let's figure out a way. Chad said we might be able to shield him from the wind. What if we make sort of a bat wing thing? Morgane suggested. If we wrap our arms around each other's waists and hold our coats open on either side, we should be able to create a fairly wide shield. If I can close my eyes and let you lead, it might help me too. It figures you'd think of bat wings, Chad said. Let's try it. The two women put their arms around each other's waists and shimmied sideways across the bridge. Roz glanced over at Morgane. Her eyes were squeezed shut. I feel pretty foolish doing this, don't you? Roz laughed. Not really. There's an art school on the other side of this bridge. You wouldn't believe some of the strange things I've seen happen here. Like what? Roz grinned. Streaking bed races, rainbow parades that had nothing to do with gay rights. The two women chuckled and continued to shuffle across the bridge side by side. Are you still with us, Chad? Morgane asked. I'm here. Oh shit. Here comes a truck. Stay as close together as you possibly. Morgane stopped. Roz took a step without her. What's wrong? Morgane paused. Chad. When he didn't answer, she called out louder. Chad. Roz stared at her wide-eyed. Oh no. Is he? Morgane let out one final cry. Chad? Where are you, goddammit? Fear. Playing some kind of game. Silence. Shit. We lost him. Morgane wailed and tossed her free hand in the air. Now. What? Let's keep going. Morgane swallowed hard. Roz was right. She couldn't stay there. Hopefully. Chad will meet us at the museum, and if not, I'll try to talk to Reginald myself. I just don't know if I can persuade him to change his story. Morgane and Roz resumed a more natural pose, as long as Roz's arm around Morgane's waist was considered natural. With Morgane's eyes closed, the two women walked next to each other over the rest of the bridge. Morgane opened her eyes and continued along the sidewalk toward the Fenway. What made Chad think he could get the other ghost to recant? You know what karma is, don't you? Roz nodded. It exists on the other side too. Chad thinks he's improved his karma since he stopped driving tenants out of the building. He hopes to transcend this plane and go to a higher one as soon as the powers that be notice. And he thinks Reginald will want to do that too? He claims that without someone to talk to, being trapped on this plane is sheer torture. He used to amuse himself with pranks on the residents, but we figured out that his behavior was probably the thing holding him back. Joe Murphy solved his murder case, so his unfinished business was finally finished. Unfortunately, he still didn't see any beam of light or porthole or anything to indicate he was welcome to transcend, so he made an excuse to stay around, saying he wanted to know how karma paid back his murderers. The truth is, it's his own karma that's in trouble. He can't transcend even though he wants to. That's terrible. So he's cleaning up his act. He's trying to. He's been such a smartass for so long, I don't expect miracles overnight. Roz kept walking. At least he has you to talk to. If Reginald hasn't had anyone to communicate with for all these years, he's probably losing it. That's what Chad thought. I mentioned there was something off about his energy and that he reminded me of Chad when I first moved into the building, before we discovered we could talk to each other. So Chad was losing it before he had you to talk to? Yeah. He was going stark raving bananas. You'd think Reginald would be nicer to me when I show up to talk to him, but maybe he knows it won't last. That could make him feel even worse, having a taste of companionship but knowing it will end as soon as the case is closed. Now it makes sense that He'd give false clues. Anything to keep you there. I know. If only I could find someone to talk to him on a regular basis. Why not you? Morgane waved away the question. If it weren't for the money I have to make a living, something tells me the museum won't hire me to chat up its disgruntled ghost. Roz made a noise as if thinking of a plan. Morgane remained quiet. Maybe the smart lawyer could come up with a solution. She let her mull it over. Reginald, please listen to me. I'm a lawyer and seeing justice done is my job. Reginald regarded the two women while one tried to reason with him and the other acted as his mouthpiece. He had nothing to lose. What if he did plant the hairs and lie about it? The police couldn't lock him up for falsifying evidence or perjury. He was already in his prison and had been there for decades. The curvy young woman with the brown and blonde strange hair could go pound sand. I've done nothing of the kind. I merely reported what I saw. Hearing his words come from a woman's mouth was still bizarre, but at least he finally had a voice. You saw Konrad take the guards to the basement and duct tape them almost 20 years ago. No, I didn't say that. I said they missed a piece of evidence and I told Morgane where to find it. The lawyer shook her head and looked disgusted. Morgane told me what our friend Chad was going to tell you before he got waylaid. Yes, about that. What detained your ghost? Why didn't he come with you? I'll let him explain when he gets here, Roz said. Meanwhile, your testimony, which can only be considered hearsay, is causing an innocent man major problems. I think you should recant. And I think you should lose a few pounds. Roz balled her fists and her face turned red. But before she came up with a retort, Reginald sensed another presence. Is someone else here? Yeah, hello, Bonehead. My name is Chad, and I have a message for you. Bonehead. It's a modern expression meaning idiot, moron, a person who's stupid beyond belief. Oh, Reginald was highly offended, but decided to play it cool. Perhaps the fellow was trying to get him so riled that he'd blurt out the truth. Well, he wouldn't let that happen. The medium continued to speak for him, but apparently the other spirit preferred she didn't. He said, Morgane, do you think you could give us a few minutes of silence to speak ghost to ghost? Morgane nodded, opened her eyes and came out of her trance. Yeah, listen up, dude. Konrad is kind and decent. He hasn't done anything to deserve this frame job, and you're an ass for not only trying to ruin his life but your afterlife too. What are you talking about? What more can happen to me? Was it possible this other spirit knew something about the afterlife? Reginald had been stuck for 80-something years, and no heaven or hell had opened its gates to claim him. At this point he didn't care which. Any change would be welcome. The other spirit sighed. Reginald didn't know why he couldn't see him. He wished he could. It would be nice to know what kind of man he was dealing with. Chad continued. Do you know what karma is? I doubt you do, or you'd realize how messed up yours is. Karma is a term I'm familiar with, although it has to do with an Eastern religion, and I fail to see what difference. That's because you're a dumb ass. All this name-calling was getting ugly. Reginald liked having someone to talk to, and he'd thought communicating with another spirit would be a special treat, but not this one. Now see here. No, you see. You'll never get to the other side if you keep pulling this kind of crap. What other side? What do you know about it, and if that's where we're supposed to be, why are you still here? I thought it was because of unfinished business, but once my murder had been solved and I still didn't move on, I realized it had to be more than that. And have you deduced what that additional criterion might be? I knew enough to realize I was losing my shit. I had gone a little nuts from being alone so long. I took it out on the residents of my building simply because I was bored. How so? I learned to move objects with my mind. It's called telekinesis. I had an obnoxious sense of humor and redirected moving objects to hit someone in the eye or set up an obstacle course so I could laugh my ass off when they tripped. And then Morgane talked to me and I slowly came to realize what I had been doing. What? Enjoying yourself. That's what I used to think. Now I know I had been lengthening my time here. In purgatory. Reginald snapped to attention. Purgatory? This is purgatory. Either that or limbo. Whatever you call it, we ain't here and we ain't there. We're trapped because we can't go back and we're not welcome wherever we were headed yet. I see. The root spirit made sense. And if I continue along this path, I'll stay here forever. I guess so. I don't know if there's someplace worse you could go or not. Looking around, I can see you have some pretty groovy digs. You might not want to downgrade. I'll have to think about whatever you just said. I said, never mind, I understood you well enough. So you'll give the ladies a statement of retraction? Certainly not. I said what I said because I saw what I saw and heard what I heard. You're a friggin' piece of work, you know that? I know nothing of the kind. And I imagine you know nothing about the afterlife. Unless you've been there and back, everything you say is just theory. Chad blew out a deep breath of exasperation. I can't think of a better explanation, can you? I'll admit I've been puzzled about why I'm still here, but I don't have the answer, and I'm sorry to say this, but neither do you. Konrad sat on his sofa with Roz and played with her cute new haircut. You couldn't get Reginald to admit he lied. I'm afraid not, Roz said. Her shoulders sagged. Chad is staying for a while, hoping to wear him down. That's surprisingly decent of him. He stretched. I have a little good news. I was able to rebook our photography class date. We can start this week. Oh, by the way, I thought of another career that might be fun. It's not something we can try on a date, though. Really? What is it? Hairstylist. I spoke to the instructor at the school where I got my hair cut, and she said training was less than a year and the job prospects in urban areas look good. It might be fun for you, but I can't see these big meaty hands of mine doing something that requires that much dexterity. I guess you have a point, but maybe I could go for hairdressing, you could go for management, and then we could buy a trendy salon. With what? Roz grimaced. Oh yeah, I forgot about the hefty down payment on a mortgage. Like that. So are you still interested in the photography classes? Maybe. Just don't take any pictures of me. Okay? He looked her up and down. Are you back to the body issue again? Well, yeah. I hate having my picture taken. I either blink or have some goofy look on my face. And then it's there for all eternity. Not with digital cameras. These days if you don't like a picture you can delete it. I guess. Maybe it will help distract us until either the case comes to trial or Chad persuades Reginald to fess up to whatever he did. Yeah, about that. I'm afraid the circumstantial evidence might be hard to disprove. You're kidding. What the hell is it? I still can't figure out why they'd want my DNA. Because a couple strands of hair were stuck to a tiny piece of duct tape left when they cut the guards loose. Since the thieves wore Boston cops' uniforms, the police checked the hair against their DNA. Your twin brother's DNA is a 99.9% match. Since twins' DNA are so similar, it could be yours. Shit, I never saw that coming. Wait, the second time I went to the museum recently when I was trying to think of how to tell you about my, condition, a toddler pulled out some of my hair. Of course. That's how Reginald got it. He must have been watching. Goddamn filthy lying ghost. He framed me for something I didn't do. Konrad leaned over, dropped his head in his hands and groaned. What now, Roz? A few days passed before Chad was able to make his way back to the building and talk to Morgane. When he said Reginald refused to back down, Roz's hopes for a retraction were dashed. She had conferred with colleagues and the best they could hope for was that Konrad's alibi would hold up or the prosecution's case would fall apart. Roz decided that to be thorough she should get ghost hunters to investigate the existence of Reginald. Not that she didn't believe Morgane, but she knew the woman needed money. Anyone could claim mediumship powers and fake a channeled spirit, right? Konrad refused to believe that Morgane would do such a thing, so he stayed out of the next part of Roz's research. She stood in an Airstream trailer in Hyde Park, the makeshift office of BASH, Boston Area Spirit Hunters, talking to the lead investigator, Sean. She had already explained the basics. He rose from his chair. You said over the phone that this is for a court case. Would we be required to testify? Not unless we can prove that the ghost doesn't exist. It would be easier to prove rather than disprove the existence of a spirit. With our infrared equipment. He pulled out a chair on the client side of his metal desk. Roz took a seat on the hard folding chair. What do you mean? If we don't see anything, it doesn't prove he isn't there because he might be hiding from us. If we capture an image, it could confirm his existence. At least in some minds, Roz said. I might luck out and get a jury who disbelieves everything supernatural, but I read studies that claim at least 60% of Americans have had first-hand encounters with some sort of spirit activity, so that's unlikely. Sean scratched his head. And yet at least 90% of the calls we investigate turn up nothing. You said this is a cognizant spirit, right? Yes, if the medium is genuine, and she probably is, then she channeled a ghost named Reginald who died in the 1930s. He seemed quite aware of who was in the room, what we looked like, and what we wanted to know. If you believe the medium is genuine, why do you need us? My natural skepticism demands it. Sean nodded. I understand, but if you hire us and we confirm his existence, then you might prefer you hadn't been so thorough. Roz paused and considered it. No, she said eventually. I need to know the truth, at least for myself. Is there any way of doing this surreptitiously? You mean without the medium knowing, or without the museum's knowledge and permission? Both, preferably. Sean leaned back in his chair and looked like he was considering the implications carefully. It's not the ideal situation. We generally like to go into places when it's dark in order to use our infrared cameras, and we'd need to gain access to off-limits areas. Spirits who want to hide, and that's most of the harmless, cognizant ones trapped on this plane without an agenda will avoid the public. We can still use thermal imaging, but it might attract attention. Damn. She should have thought this over more carefully or asked more questions over the telephone. We could always bring in our own sensitive. Your own what? Sensitive. It's what psychics and mediums like to be called these days. Have a few I trust completely. They've worked with us while we're using our equipment, and usually the sensitive's contacts validate the electronic findings and vice versa. I see, so I assume you charge less for the sensitive only, since you wouldn't need to use your fancy cameras and thermal equipment. I'm sure we can work something out. After breaking everything down, Roz negotiated a fair price and signed the contract, hiring BSH if for no other reason than to put her own mind at ease. She didn't have to tell Konrad about it, did she? After all her fuss about honesty, she felt a little conflicted, but the less he knew about certain things, the better. He'd be bound by oath to answer all questions truthfully. Would she have to verify the haunting of the Gardner Museum in court? Not unless they place me on the witness stand. Very unlikely. And even then she could word her answers like a good lawyer and commit to nothing. When Roz returned to her apartment, she found an envelope addressed to her, taped on the front door. She recognized the handwriting. Immediately she ripped it open. Oh no. Konrad's door slammed, and when Roz glanced up, he was jogging down the stairs. What's wrong, Angel? How did you know something was wrong? I was coming down to see if you were home anyway, and I smelled fear. He nodded at the paper in her hand. Is there something in that note that upset you? It's nothing. She glanced away and tried to act casual. You can smell fear. He folded his arms and frowned. Yes. Now you want complete honesty from me. So I think I should expect the same from you. She stepped back. Yeah, you're right, but I can handle this. And by this you mean my stepfather's in town and wants to see me. Konrad's eyes popped. The perv. It's okay. He just heard I have a high-profile case and said he wants to help. Roz made finger quotes in the air. That's right, he's a lawyer too. Yeah, and what he really means is he wants a piece of the publicity. I'd like to be present when you talk to him. No. She bit her lower lip. I mean, I don't think that's a great idea, considering you're the defendant, unless you want the benefit of his expertise. Hell no. I don't want anything from him. I just want to be sure you're safe. I will be. Don't worry. That's like telling me not to get furry under the full moon. It isn't something I can control. At least let me hide nearby so you can call me telepathically if you need me. She thought it over. I guess it would make me more comfortable knowing you were handy just in case. You're not the only one who can smell fear. Season. Lawyers are good at that too. She quickly added. But I want to be the one to stand up to him. Noted. When and where are you seeing him? He said he was going to lunch with a client and he'd check back here after that. Okay, so we'll wait for him in your apartment. When he knocks, I'll lock myself in your bedroom. There's no lock on my bedroom door. Then I like the idea of being in there even better. She folded her arms. It's not like he's going to try anything again. He'd better not. Roz jumped when she heard a knock on her door. Konrad, sitting next to her on the couch, pulled her close and whispered, "If you need anything at all, I'll be right in the next room." He gave her a quick kiss and retreated to the bedroom. She rose, steeled herself for facing her stepfather, and hoped the meeting wasn't as awkward as she anticipated. She crossed to the door warily and opened it a crack. There he stood, hands in his pressed pants pockets, looking as nervous as she felt. "Hello, Roz." She crossed her arms. "Hello, jerk. What do you want?" He smiled the smarmy smile she remembered. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Roz. Water. Under the bridge. Can't we be friends after all this time?" "Not really." He held up both hands. "Well, I came in peace. In fact, I thought I could help you. I understand you have a difficult case coming up. I have all the help I need, thank you." He hung his head. "Please don't be like that, Roz. We haven't talked in so long, and you never know, I might have some insight. If you're uncomfortable inviting me into your apartment, perhaps I can take you out for a cup of coffee." She wasn't fooled by his contrite act. He'd never admitted doing anything wrong, and she knew he never would. "No thanks, Stan. I have coffee here." He tossed his hands in the air and paced, but he didn't leave. She knew him well enough to know he wouldn't, even or maybe especially when he looked exasperated and was getting nowhere. At last he whirled on her and took his authoritative stance. "There's no reason in the world you should treat me this way. I have nothing but your success in mind. Surely you can't believe I'd be fool enough to come here with any motive other than professional. Look at you. It's not like you're irresistibly attractive. You've put on at least 20 pounds. The fine hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Roz's nostrils flared, and she clamped her lips together tight so she wouldn't say anything to make her sound like the hurt little girl he was trying to manipulate her into becoming. "Roz, I'm coming out." "No, I can handle this. Stay right where you are." Then end the conversation. One more comment like he just made and I'll punch him in the face. Roz stepped back and began to close the door. "What's the matter?" "I just spoke the truth to ease your mind and put the past behind us." She mustered an even tone and said, "The past is part of me now. Maybe that's the extra weight you're looking at." "Oh, now don't try to blame." The loud bang as the door slammed drowned out the rest of Stan's sentence. She turned the deadbolt and ignored his demands to open the door. Konrad came barreling out of the bedroom. She placed herself between him and the door and pushed on his solid chest, stopping him. "Are you all right?" he asked. She took a deep breath and exhaled in an effort to steady her nerves. "I'm fine, or I will be." "Roz, please let me escort him to the sidewalk by the seat of his pants." "No, it's better if he doesn't see you. Just hold me." He grasped her in a tight embrace. She felt his heart pounding and imagined adrenaline rushing through his veins. He really does love me enough to fight for me. Yet he's willing to listen and respect my wishes. It's a damn good thing, since I'm 99% sure that jerkface will be in the courtroom for the trial. "Take me to the bedroom," she whispered. "I need to lie down." He swooped her into his arms and carried her to her bed. Gently he placed her in the center of the bed and crawled in next to her. Propped up on his elbow, he asked, "Is there anything else I can do? Can I call Dottie and sick her on him?" Roz laughed. "You don't have to protect me from everything, Konrad. I appreciate your being here for me, but honestly, sometimes all I need is your moral support." "You've got it." He bent over and kissed her tenderly. "But just in case I need to know whom I'm punching out sometime, what's his name?" Roz chuckled. "Stanley Addison." "Well, if he upsets you again, he'll be Mr. Subtract a Sum." Chapter 15. Morgane. Morgane was whipping up a batch of something brown and gooey. Could be an earth-based spell-infused poultice, a mud mask, or brownies. Chad was never sure what the witches were concocting. She didn't respond, stop stirring, or even act as if she'd heard him. "Earth to Morgane. Or maybe I should say air to Morgane. Chad here. Knock, knock. Come in, Morgane." She set down the bowl with a thump. "What the hell do you want, Chad?" "Well, excuse me. Did I just interrupt some kind of George Clooney daydream? Or something?" "For your information, I was visualizing the manifestation of my intentions and stirring the energy into—" "Oh, never mind. You don't really care." Chad hovered above the stove since it was warmer there. "No, I don't. But now That I've broken your concentration anyway. Can you help me talk to my roommate? Can't you see I'm busy? Get Gwyneth to do it. She's probably over there. Anyway, I can't. It's her I want to talk to him about. Huh. If you have a problem with Gwyneth, why don't you just talk to Gwyneth? I did. She doesn't care. Doesn't care about what? Whether or not she breaks my roommate's heart. Chad rubbed his spirit hands together, trying to warm up. Morgane put her hand on her hip and grinned. Why, Chad Robinson, I can't believe you're worried about your roommate's happiness. As far as I know, you've never cared about anyone but yourself. That's true. And I'm not really looking out for him now either. I'm worried that if she dumps him, he'll fall apart and move out rather than having to face her every day. And how is that not looking out for him? I'm looking out for myself. I don't want to listen to a broken down, blubbering middle-aged man who'll never get a nice piece of tail like Gwyneth again. Hey, that's my cousin you're talking about. Well, forgive me for having eyes. You know what I mean. Morgane relented. Yes, it's true. Gwyneth is stunning. Most guys can't resist her, but she wouldn't break up with Joe without a good reason. Yes, she would. She told me she was just using him to research her erotica novel. Are you nuts? Completely, but I'm not a liar. Morgane paused pensively. But I thought her novel was about a coal miner in West Virginia. Joe is a private investigator in Boston. It is. That's not the part she needs help with. She's using his body to better describe her sex scenes. Morgane burst out laughing. When she was able to talk again, she said, I thought you were a guy, Chad. I doubt Joe minds helping her research her sex scenes. You wouldn't laugh if you saw the way he looks at her. He's fallen head over heels in love. I know the signs. Like what? He preens before she comes over. He keeps the apartment immaculate and doesn't ask her to lift a finger. He sports a goofy grin on his face whenever he looks at her. So? It sounds like he's treating her well. What's wrong with that? Just that he'll be bummed out when she finishes that book. She has no intention of staying with him. I still don't get how this involves you. I let him stay because he worked on my murder case. But the precedent's been set by my allowing a roommate. Dottie will try to rent my pad again and again. And again, and you know I'll drive off anyone who moves in. Morgane smirked and shook her head. Now it makes sense. Don't you witches have some kind of code about not hurting others? But how do you know she's planning to break up with him? She told me she was going to, what was it? Tell him to go catch tadpoles in another lily pond. She said that? When? Yesterday. Morgane frowned. Yeah, that's not good. Doesn't sound like she's really taking the witch's read seriously, if she knows how hurt Joe will be. Maybe she doesn't realize he's in love with her. Has he ever told her? Not when I was around, but I told her. She didn't seem to care. Shit. That doesn't sound like the Gwyneth I know. Let me talk to her before you say anything to Joe, okay? Chad emitted a loud sigh and floated toward the door. Fine. I'll wait. But if I have to listen to a grown man cry. Morgane folded her arms. You'll what? Try something I've been saving for a special occasion. You'll see. Morgane cringed. You've got to be kidding. Roz stood toe-to-toe with Konrad and jammed her hands on her hips. I will not film our sex. Body issues, remember? I thought we put those fears to rest. Konrad grabbed his jeans and stepped into them. Their lovemaking had been fantastic. Was it so bad to want a little souvenir? Yeah, they're resting, not dead. Show me my naked body through a medium that adds 10 pounds and see how quickly those feelings of shame and disgust wake up. He reared back. Shame and disgust? Roz, how can you possibly? Careful, guy. You don't want her thinking she's stupid as well as overweight. Never mind. Just thought it would be fun. And I thought you were over that silly belief that you're somehow not the most beautiful woman in Boston because of your weight. I find nothing disgusting about you. You're the most exquisite woman I know. She smiled, but there was a sadness in her beautiful blue eyes. I know you think that, but you make a grand total of one. I guess I've got my work cut out for me. Roz picked up her clothes from the floor. What do you mean? I won't be satisfied until you believe it too. Konrad swept her into his arms and held her close. He cupped the back of her head and kissed her hair. Should I tell you again how I see you? No, it'll just embarrass me. Man, you're really putting yourself in a no-win situation, Roz. Look at me. He stepped back slightly and lifted her chin until she stared into his eyes. You have the softest, creamiest skin and the most magnificent blue eyes that stand out even more because of your dark hair, perfect eyebrows, and thick lashes. The highlights you added couldn't make you more radiant. And I love the new haircut. Very cool. I know most guys don't comment on things like that, but we notice them. Seriously. Yeah, seriously. And you're not fat. You're voluptuous. I like grabbing onto you and finding a real woman, not a bag of bones. I'm sure I'm not the only guy on earth like that. You've dated a few guys before, right? Yes. I haven't had any long-term relationships, but I dated a couple of guys. In high school, a few guys in college, one in law school, the occasional drunk hits on me, but that doesn't count. Why doesn't that count? They have eyes. Yeah, and they're probably seeing double. Maybe they think I'm twins. Konrad shook his head. Roz, what am I going to do with you? She smiled again and most of the sadness was gone. I don't know. Love me? That might work. Eventually. I can do that. He dipped his head and captured her lips in a long, sweet kiss. When he finally released her, he said, I have things you could find fault with too, you know. Like what? Like the fact that I'm poor now. Or poorer, I should say. He spoke softly. I don't think I can make the rent this month. Oh no. I shouldn't have let you pay for all our dates. And the bail money must have wiped you out. She grabbed his arms and tried to shake him. Why? Didn't you tell me? Pride. Stupid pride. Let me help you this month and don't say no. I was just going to tell you not to say that. I know. He sighed and pulled his t-shirt over his head. Dottie will have to understand. Does she seem understanding to you? He smirked. No. But I've never been late with the rent before. That has to count for something. He grabbed her hand. Let's go up to my place. I'll make you lunch. I should make you lunch. Food isn't cheap either, especially all the steak. You eat. A loud bang and what sounded like two females yelling at each other filtered through Roz's closed door. Konrad wandered toward the sound. What the? As soon as he opened the door, he recognized the voices. Gwyneth and Morgane were getting into it. They must have been on the third floor, but outside their apartment, since even without his wolfish hearing he could make out every harsh word. Are you calling me a slut? Are you acting like one? No. I'm only making the most of what the goddess gave me. Even if it goes against the witch's read? I ain't huttin' nobody. Oh yeah? Then why did Chad say you used Joe and were about to dump him? How do I know? The fact of the matter is it ain't none of y'all's business. A huge ruckus ensued. Worried about what they could do to each other if they used their powers, Konrad rushed up the stairs. What he saw at the top of the third floor landing made him stop. It was like watching a train wreck. The two women were rolling around on the floor, grabbing clothes, pulling hair, and scratching. As Gwyneth was about to bite, he charged in. That's enough, ladies. He grabbed Gwyneth by her macrame belt and lifted her off Morgane. While he held her suspended in midair, Morgane scrambled to her feet. Now what's this all about? He asked. Morgane adjusted her black blouse and blew a piece of hair out of her mouth. Chad told me Gwyneth was using Joe to write her book, and now that it's finished she's planning to dump him. Gwyneth, if I put you down, will you retract your claws and talk to your cousin calmly? Sure, if she minds her own beeswax. Konrad set Gwyneth on her feet. Morgane crossed her arms. So you aren't denying it? Denying what? What Chad said, that you were going to tell Joe to go fishing for tadpoles in another lily pond. He wants kids. I don't. I think it's called basic incompatibility. It's got nothing to do with using and dumping. Morgane shook her head. I wouldn't use that metaphor if I were you. Should know better than to believe Chad. He's probably watching us right now. Yeah, and Logan his ass off. Gwyneth cocked her head. I can't hear him. Though, can you? No. Konrad rested his hands on his hips. He must know better than to piss off a couple of powerful witches. That's why I came rushing up here. I wondered if you two might start throwing lightning bolts at each other. Both women laughed. Gwyneth drawled. We can't shoot lightning out of our fingertips like buckshot sugar. And if we could, we wouldn't, Morgane added. To attack with our powers would be black magic, and we know better than to dabble in that. So instead you attack each other with your vicious words, long fingernails, and teeth. The women looked at each other and shrugged. Morgane sighed. I know how it must look. She eyed her cousin. We really should know better than to handle things this way. Scrappin' ain't egin the witch's reed so far as I know. Konrad frowned. What happens now? Are you going to be able to live together again? Gwyneth crossed her arms. Depends. Is my Butinsky cousin gonna stop trying to run my life? The door to 3A clicked and opened. A dejected-looking Joe strolled into the hallway. Let me save you girls some trouble, he said. I'm moving out. Morgane gasped and narrowed her gaze on Gwyneth. Gwyneth sidled up next to Joe and stroked his arm. Y'all don't have to go on account of little ol' me. No, I want to be closer to the beach. Yeah, summer's coming and I thought I'd rent a beach house. Well, that sounds like fun, Gwyneth said. I hope y'all still want to be friends. Morgane gave her the hairy eyeball. Konrad coughed discreetly and mumbled, well, I'll let all of you work this out. Just as he was about to descend the stairs, he pivoted. Don't kill each other, he mumbled under his breath. It's not worth the guilt. The trio stared at him wide-eyed as he turned to jog back downstairs to Roz's apartment. Roz was glad Konrad was upstairs when her phone rang. It was Sean at BSH. Apparently Morgane's validity as a medium had checked out. I thought you said you debunked 90% of haunting reports. We do, Sean said. Unfortunately, it looks as if the museum is one of the other 10%. Our sensitive confirmed the presence of a spirit, neither friendly nor unfriendly. It's what we call a benign haunting. Well, there's nothing benign about what this spirit is trying to do to my client by framing him. Sean cleared his throat. With all due respect, did it ever occur to you that your client might be guilty? Roz's jaw dropped. Konrad guilty? She felt like a fool. No, she hadn't considered it. Not for a moment. And why not? Was her judgment clouded because she was sleeping with him? Ma'am, is there anything else we can do for you? No. Thank you for investigating it and getting back to me so quickly. Our pleasure. It was an interesting place. I might go back there just to enjoy the atmosphere. Be careful you don't piss off the resident ghost. Roz hung up. Konrad returned and let himself in. Is everything okay? Damn, I need to work on my poker face. Yeah. Didn't you say you had an alibi for the night of the theft? Yeah, but I also told you it can't be proven. Why not? Konrad stared at the ceiling. Oh boy. What is it? Tell me. Okay. I guess now that you know about me I can tell you more. I was with my pack. Oh, you have a pack? And the trial lands on the full moon. That means they probably won't testify, for fear of being caught in the city when they shift. But don't you shift at midnight? And you live in the city. Somehow you manage to handle it. Konrad hung his head. There's something else I never told you. I was kicked out of the pack in disgrace. Roz didn't have the heart to be angry with him for withholding more facts from her. His shame showed plainly on his face. Roz sat woodenly on the edge of a chair. I wonder how many of the people who work here are werewolves? Konrad had said his pack ran the school, so it could mean several were, even the nice secretary she'd just spoken to. The current dean of Newton Prep had refused to see her, but his secretary told her not to leave. Apparently she knew others who would be willing to talk with her about Konrad. At last the secretary returned. If you'll follow me to the faculty lounge, I can introduce you to several staff members who'd love to talk with you. Roz rose. Love to? She followed the woman out the door and down a long corridor, heels tapping loudly. It's unusual for lawyers to be welcomed with open arms. Usually we're met with reactions more like that of your dean. Oh no. I think you'll find there's a great deal of interest among the faculty as far as Konrad is concerned. Can you tell me where he is now? Is he okay? Roz raised her eyebrows in surprise. Doesn't he keep in touch? The woman dropped her gaze. Sadly, no. And I can't say I blame him. We made a terrible mistake and treated him horribly. I think it's safe to say that all's forgiven now, at least on our end. He told me he was kicked out. I don't think he's angry, just sad. The woman stopped in front of the door that said, Faculty Lounge in bold letters on the window. I wish I could stay with you, but I'd be missed if the phone rings. Roz stiffened. Why? Am I not safe alone in there? She chuckled. No, it's not that. You're perfectly safe. I just have to get back to my ass hat of a boss. Oh. Roz smiled at the woman's candor. Well, thanks. Maybe I'll see you later. That would be nice, but the others will fill me in. She opened the door for her. It's better if the dean doesn't see you talking to any of us. A normal-looking group sat around a table. They glanced up and stopped eating. As soon as she entered the room, the men stood. One of the gentlemen pulled out a chair for her. Have a seat, Miss Wells. Thank you. Fortunately, her seat was close to the door in case anyone looked hungry. Before he even returned to his seat, he said, We're all very curious about how Konrad is doing. You said you were his lawyer. Is he in trouble? Unfortunately, he might be. I need to verify his alibi. He said he was with some of you here on the evening of March 18, 1990. The group looked at each other. Finally, a woman spoke up. How are we supposed to remember where we were on a particular evening more than 20 years ago? Roz cleared her throat. It was the night of the burglary at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. A collective gasp filled the room. The woman who had spoken before said, You can't possibly think he had anything to do with the stolen art. Roz still didn't want to commit to a position, but the fact that these people seemed to find it impossible to believe helped. It doesn't matter what I think. The state thinks there's enough evidence to bring him to trial. Several people began speaking at once. Some asked Roz more questions. Some expressed outrage. Others were having one-on-one conversations. Hold on, the gentleman who had seated her said. This isn't going to get us anywhere. Let's all think, and if anyone remembers anything from that night, share it one at a time. And please give me your names as you do, Roz added. An older gentleman raised his hand. Wendell is my name. I have one question. First, he glanced around the room. I think we need to know what she knows about us. Roz nodded, and they all stared at her. As casually as she could manage, she said, Are you referring to the fact that some of you are werewolves? She saw several raised eyebrows, but the room remained deathly quiet. She waited. Someone had to respond. Are you a werewolf? Wendell asked. No. The gentleman who spoke to her first bristled. What makes you think werewolves exist? Your name, sir, is Barrett. She tried to keep her cool. This was no time to show fear or back down. She hadn't seen Konrad shift as he claimed he could, but the whole telepathy thing was certainly supernatural. Well, Mr. Barrett, I know this because I'm his lawyer, and I needed to know. The woman who had spoken previously shook her head and said, No, he wouldn't divulge that to his lawyer, even if his life depended on it. Your name, ma'am? She hesitated, folded her arms and bit out, Lois. All right, Lois. To whom would he divulge that information if not to his lawyer? No one, she said indignantly. Roz decided to go with Konrad's truth, even if she wasn't totally there yet. Not even his mate? More eyebrows shot up. Finally Barrett spoke. Are you saying you're his mate? Roz raised her chin proudly. I am. More agitated conversation broke out around the table. She heard the word human spoken as if it tasted like rotting meat. Lois raised her hand and everyone quieted. Prove it, she said. Show us your mark. Roz straightened her back. I will not, she said as if deeply offended. Hope whatever that mark is, it appears in some really personal place. I'm guessing if my mate put it there, it could be on my ass and I wouldn't even know. He probably guessed I'd never look there. To answer their question with another question, Roz tipped her head. How about telepathic communication? Does that do it for ya? Amid the stunned silence, she heard a sigh of relief, or maybe it was some other kind of sigh, like one at the end of a sappy movie. Lois smiled. Yes, that helps. Wendell scrutinized her. And you don't mind that he's a werewolf? Roz supplied. I'm not crazy about it, but I am crazy about him. The group nodded and murmured. Good, then if you're as concerned about Konrad as you seem to be, maybe you can all help me help him. How? Wendell asked. I'm hoping for an alibi. Does anyone remember being with him at that time? They all glanced around the room at each other. Eventually a few pack members shook their heads, followed by more. Eventually it seemed as if everyone had weighed in, and the answer was no. Wait a minute, Wendell said. I think I remember something. Roz's ears perked up with hope.